Thanks everyone for coming to our Teach in Spain webinar. We're going to be going over the Teach in Spain program broadly and also the application. At the end, we'll go over your question and answers and answer any questions that you have. So let's get started. All right, first I want to introduce myself. My name is Laura and I'm the senior coordinator for the Teach in Spain team. You may have already heard from me. I've sent everyone many emails at this point, but if you decide to do our program and apply, you'll hear a lot more from me. You'll also hear from my colleague Luke, who also works on our programs. I'll let Luke introduce himself.
Thank you, Laura. Hi, everyone. My name's Luke. I'm the operations manager for CIEE Teach Abroad. That's actually a picture of me visiting Andalusia in the south of Spain, down in that shot there, back when I had a little more hair. I'm excited to be working with Laura and with all of you to help set up this experience.
Cool, thanks, Luke. We have a lot to go over today, so we'll try to keep the presentation short, but these are the topics that we'll be going over. As we're talking through these, please feel free to type your questions into the question and answer function. So not in the chat function, the question and answer, and everything that we didn't cover in the presentation, we'll go over at the end. First, I want to talk about the Teach in Spain program broadly. The programs that we have running this fall are all for the full academic year in the community of Madrid. On our website, you may have seen we have different variations of the program, but in terms of the teaching component, all of these programs are the same. You'll be working as a language assistant in a public school in the community of Madrid. Everyone gets the same stipend of €1,000 a month. Your teaching commitment is also the same, so you'll be teaching from the beginning of October to the end of June, but your start dates and your orientation will be a little bit different. What's included in your program fees? It's mainly service and support from CIEE from now up until when you get back from Spain. So before you go, it's the pre-departure assistance mainly comprises of visa guidance and advising on travel and travel restrictions and things like that. Once you get to Spain, you'll have a hotel stay, different lengths of hotel stays depending on your program. In orientation, we have a staff in Madrid and they're there to help and support you the whole time that you're in Spain. So you always have people to ask questions to. We have a 24/7 emergency line that you can call if anything happens while you're in Madrid. In our program fees, we also provide travel insurance, and this covers everything from normal travel insurance, things like lost baggage fees, to medical expenses. All right, so I'm going to go through the different program types. The first one is the Teach in Spain Immersion. We have, I guess I'll start from the beginning. So once you get to Spain, you'll have 7 nights in a hotel with CIEE. So you'll get to know the other participants and have some orientation time. After that 7-night hotel stay, then you'll live with a host family for 2 or 4 weeks, depending on what you choose when applying for the program. While you're living with the host family, you will be also taking Spanish immersion classes. You'll take a placement test before you start taking these classes, so you'll be with other students at your level. So this is a program that's good for people at any level, Spanish speaking level. And then after you're done with that 2 or 4 week immersion time, you'll start teaching in Madrid and find your own housing and live in your own apartment. This is what we kind of call the regular Teach in Spain program, colloquially. It's our most popular option. So it doesn't have the Spanish courses and the host family component beforehand. You get to Spain, you have a 7-night hotel stay. During that time, you'll do some orientation activities. This is a good time to look for housing and kind of get your life set up for in Spain. So getting like your bank accounts and your phone and all that taken care of before you start teaching. And then we also have Teach in Spain Basics. This is a great option for participants with a lot of experience. So because all of our basics participants have a high level of experience, they have less support, especially at the beginning of the program from CIEE, because maybe they don't need it because they have a lot of experience living abroad before. So when you get to Madrid, you only stay 2 nights in the hotel before you're on your own. And some additional eligibility requirements of this program are that you have had to have lived in a Spanish-speaking country before, you have teaching experience, and you have strong Spanish skills. And if you ever have questions about if you meet eligibility requirements, you're always welcome to talk to us and see what the best fit, which program is the best fit for you. Okay, like I said, the programs are different, especially at the beginning of the time that you get to Spain, but the teaching component is the same. So your teaching title is going to be Language and Culture Assistant. You will be working at a public school. They tend to be bilingual schools, and you are instructing in English, but because sometimes you're at a bilingual school, you might be teaching different subject areas. It's an assistant position, so you are not always in the classroom with a lead local teacher. And it's also a part-time position. So you have 16 hours of instruction per week. You'll probably be working more than 16 hours a week because you have meeting and lesson planning times, but it is meant to be a part-time position, and then you work 4 days a week. The duties that you'll have really vary depending on the school and on the teacher, but these are we have down here in the duty section, a few of like common things that our language and culture assistants have done in the past. Right, so now that you have an idea of what our programs look like, I'm sure you're all wondering how this program is operating in the context of COVID. So first, we want to give you a little bit of background on how Spain is managing COVID-19. So for the most part, the government of Spain has done a pretty good job of responding and trying to instate restrictions to manage the pandemic. Since this fall, really, what this has mainly looked like is limiting the sizes of social gatherings, limiting business hours and capacity, instating a curfew. Sometimes it gets bumped up, sometimes it gets bumped back. If there is a major outbreak in a particular area of Spain, sometimes they stop allowing travel to that region. And then when the outbreak is more under control, they reopen it, and masks are required in public. But I think the important thing to remember as you look through all these restrictions is that these are kind of like the general guidelines. This is what we've seen in the last few months, but the specifics of the restrictions are changing quite frequently, and it will, change between now and fall, and by the time and during your year abroad, it will be changing as well. So I think that a good place to kind of keep updated, if you're curious, is the U.S. Embassy of Spain website. They have updates on how the restrictions in Spain right now. But in terms of what is open, life is continuing on in Spain and in Madrid. Businesses are open, bars and restaurants are open. People are going to school and to work, and probably most relevant to all of you, schools are in person in Madrid. So to talk about how CIEE and the program has changed because of the pandemic, we've been able to operate our Teach in Spain program since September. So we fully plan on running it again next year, and we believe that we can run it safely and smoothly. We've had to make a few changes, and there are some additional precautions that we want to go over so you're aware of what the expectations are. Spain is requiring that all international travelers show a negative COVID test to enter the country. As of today, there are no vaccine requirements. We don't know if or how that will change in the coming months. It's difficult to predict, but should anything change, we'll let you know. And we don't recommend that you travel internationally during this program. So we fully support traveling within Spain during your year, but try to limit international travel. As far as our program is concerned, our orientation has been really different. This past year, we're planning on conducting orientation via webinar. And then we will have some in-person components that are conducted in small groups outdoors. So that probably would be like a walking tour, which you can see a picture of to the right. But you do get the same length of hotel stay that your program intends to have. And some reassuring news to you is the travel insurance that's included in your program fees does cover expenses related to illness up to 100,000 US dollars. As for schools, like I said, all public schools reopened in person in Madrid this past fall. They do have the ability to switch to remote or hybrid, but for the most part, all of our teachers are continuing to teach in person. Before you start teaching, you will have to show a negative COVID test to start teaching at your school. But we've been able to send about over 400 participants in the 2020 to 2021 academic year. So we're hoping to send many, many more this fall. Well, great. So now I think we can dive into some specifics of the program. The school, you will get your school place. The CIEE and the government of Madrid work collaboratively to give out school placements to all of our participants. You can be placed anywhere in the community of Madrid. So this includes Madrid, the city, but it also includes the whole region that Madrid is in. This means that most school placements are outside of the city center, but all of the schools will be accessible through public transportation. In your application, you can request where you would like your school to be located, but we'll do our best to fulfill all requests, but we probably will not be able to satisfy all requests. So I think some important things to bear in mind is you should really only commit to this program if you're open to teaching anywhere in the community of Madrid. And you should also keep in mind that we will give out placements in order of when we receive the deposit. So the sooner you can commit to the program, the higher priority you'll get with your placement. Housing is not included in the program fees. This is done totally independently. I think the plus of that is while your school placements, you can only preference, your housing you have total control over. So you can choose your roommates, you can choose where you live. So if your school is not in your ideal location, you can live in the place that you'd like. CIEE will give kind of general guidance and resources about how to find housing, some advice about how to structure your housing search. But for the most part, this is each individual participant's responsibility. Here we have a picture of a past participant's apartment to kind of give you an idea of what things look like. Rent can get pretty expensive in Madrid. I would say just keep that in mind as you're doing the search. There's a big variance in price. Like most places, location is a big determinant of how high rent is. And most of our participants will be able to find a place in 2 weeks. For the visa for this program, the Spain visa is a pretty complicated process, but that's what CIEE is here for, to kind of demystify that process. You will apply for a student visa to do this program. You will give you very, very detailed instructions on how to apply for a visa and when. So while all of our participants do individually apply for a visa, we are there every step of the way, kind of guiding you through that process. If you have questions, you can certainly always ask us and we'll be able to help where we can. There are some visa related costs to keep in mind, which I can kind of explain more here. The visa application itself has a fee of $160. A lot of the documents that are required for the visa have additional costs to them as well. And depending on where you live and depending on where your consulate is, you may have to travel to apply for a visa. So these are some things to keep in mind as you're applying. There are, beyond just the program fees, there are additional costs to the program. Here on this table, we have outlined some of the major costs before you depart. And we also recommend that you have $2,000 to $3,000 saved before you even get to Madrid. This will help you with a lot of the startup costs in Madrid before you start receiving your monthly stipend. Okay. Before you go, you'll have opportunities to connect with other participants virtually. We'll start a Facebook group for you all so you can get to know each other, share where you're placed. This is also a great way to find roommates. We'll have a pre-departure online course that will enroll all of you in. It's not meant to be a major time commitment. I think of it more as like a resource library for living in Madrid. And then we'll also have our webinars and orientations, both online and in person. If you want to renew and stay another year, you can. That's a possibility with this program. You can work for 2 years total as a language assistant in Madrid. We'll have more information about that once you're actually in Spain. Finally, as you're gearing up to start teaching, we highly recommend that you get some teaching experience before you go. I think while it's not required for the program, it will certainly make you a more confident teacher in the classroom. CIEE offers a Teaching English as a Foreign Language course. This is TEFL. A TEFL certification is kind of a baseline requirement for a lot of schools abroad. Again, it's not required for this particular program, but it is a good way to get some experience and knowledge before you start teaching. You can certainly consider signing up for our online course. It's something that you can add on to your Teach in Spain application at any time. You can choose, it's online, there's a start date every 2 weeks, so you can choose a time that is convenient for you. And if you have more questions, we encourage you to reach out to our TEFL team at tefl@ciee.org. All right, finally, we should talk about the application. Applications are due very soon. March 1st is the deadline. We are reviewing applications on a rolling basis, so the sooner you get your application in, the sooner you'll be reviewed. Regardless, if you get your app in by the deadline, you can expect to hear back by March 15th. If you haven't already started an application, you can do so at my.ciee.org. That link below will also show you all the programs that we have in Spain if you want to read a little bit more about our program offerings. And then finally, I want to give a couple of application troubleshooting tips. We have a lot of recommenders struggle with uploading the recommendation letter to our portal. If that's the case, please let your recommender know that they can always email their letter to us at teachinspain@ciee.org. We'll make sure that it's uploaded to your application, so you don't have to worry about all the tech there. And if there are any people in the audience who are currently in college, I want to let you know that if you're graduating this spring, you can still apply. That it is required that you have a bachelor's degree by the time you start the program. But as you know, if you're graduating this spring and you're working on the application now, instead of uploading a diploma, you can have your university registrar or academic advisor write a note stating your expected graduation date. So we know that you don't have your diploma now, but you will have it at the time the program starts. Okay, that was a lot of information, but that is our overview of the program and of the application. And I think Luke and I can start answering your questions.
Thanks, Laura. This is Luke here. Great job with walking through all that info. We have, in fact, had a lot of questions coming in. I've been responding to some of them individually. I believe some of the answers may be visible to folks in the audience if I type them. And I've set aside some that I wanted to field to Laura so we could talk through them live together so everyone could hear. So let's start out with briefly, what are the next steps if somebody wants to do this?
Yes, great question. So I would say the most important thing right now is to apply because we're pretty close to the deadline. Oops, let me go back. So again, this is the website to access our applications. Open up, you can open one up and then start working through it. The main pieces of it are a personal statement, resume, letter of recommendation. And then, you know, like you can start the visa process, the housing, all of that. That doesn't come until much later on. So yeah, I would just focus right now on getting your application in so we can review it and then we'll go from there. Anything you want to add, Luke?
No, that's perfect. Okay. When do teaching duties start, and when will teachers arrive? I know that varies. The arrival part varies a bit by program, but I'll let you tackle the teaching duties first.
Yes, good question. Teaching duties will start. Oops. Teaching duties start early October and end at the end of June. This is the same across all programs. And then the immersion programs start sometime in August. The regular Teach in Spain program probably September, early to mid September, and then basics early to mid to late September.
Awesome. I'll add that the program is usually large enough that it breaks up into multiple start dates, you know, especially for the regular program. So you know, even within our standard Teach in Spain program, we may have 2 different start dates in September. The start dates don't get finalized until early summer, so we'll obviously be providing that information to applicants later on, but not something we can pin down quite this far in advance. Okay. There's a couple questions about opportunities to connect with other teachers. You know, either to just build a social network or to potentially room together. Could you speak about how we approach that for the Teach in Spain programs, Laura?
Yeah, sure. So like I said, we'll put all of the participants in a Facebook group, probably like in the spring, summer time. So a couple months before the program starts. And that is meant to be like totally social and completely optional as well. So if you want to connect with CIEE participants, you are more than welcome to. And yeah, I think a lot of it, because it's intended to be a social space for you, it's intended to be your space. Like, please feel free to take the initiative to reach out to people, post in there, share things about yourself. And that's always a good option to find roommates as well. Like you can just post in the group and let people know, like, this is kind of what I'm interested in terms of rooming. I'd love to find a roommate. And that's a really common way that our participants find roommates.
Great. Yeah. How about a couple questions about housing? So how far in advance of arrival can people organize apartments and living accommodations? I'm happy to chime in on this, Laura. If you feel like you've got it, take it away.
Okay, yeah. We recommend that you start the housing search once you get to Madrid, mainly so you can, for a few reasons, but the main reason is that we think it's important that you can see the apartment in person before you put down a deposit and sign a lease. The housing market is fast in Madrid, so like new apartments are showing up quite frequently. So it is common, I guess, for people in Madrid to find apartments on short notice. Is there anything you want to add, Luke?
Yeah, I'm scrolling through to look at a couple other questions on this theme. I would say, yes, definitely. It's not something that's usually possible to pin down far in advance, like you said. You know, our standard Teach in Spain program has 7 nights in a hotel for temporary accommodations. Many people would be able to find housing in that time if they're moving quickly. Even if they couldn't, people typically, you know, take an Airbnb with a friend or two, you know, or hotel or hostel, whatever your budget is, if they feel like they need additional temporary housing while they're searching for a permanent apartment. So that's obviously especially important for the basics program, which only has 2 nights of temporary accommodations. So I think it's kind of expected that, you know, if you have a friend whose couch you can crash on in Madrid, that fits well with the basics program, or just know that you're likely not going to have your housing pinned down when you first arrive, so that you may be, you know, taking an Airbnb for a while to give yourself some space and time to do that. And there's another question about, you know, what CIEE's housing support resources look like. So well before departure, we sort of have a pre-departure, almost like an encyclopedia. It's an online course that's, you know, purely to sort of communicate advice and information and guidance to people about getting ready for the transition to Spain. And that includes sort of discussion of neighborhoods, vocabulary that's helpful for apartment searching, and advice from former teachers, tips on how to negotiate a lease. And of course, that's also something that gets covered a lot at our sort of live orientation as departure is about to happen or right after people arrive, you know, which will probably be online again this fall, but traditionally has been in person. Yeah, so hopefully that's a helpful discussion of housing. You know, everyone has those resources, whether they're doing Spain Basics or Spain Regular or Spain Immersion. Any other thoughts on that topic, Laura?
I think you covered it.
Cool. We've got several people who are asking about the timeline for decisions. Once someone's offered acceptance to the program, how long do they have to decide and make a deposit?
Yeah, that's a great question. We will, in all of our like emails and stuff, we will recommend 10 days to put down the deposit. So you know, if you're just applying to the Teach in Spain program, the deposit is $500 and non-refundable, goes towards your program fees. If you're applying to the Teach in Spain program with our TEFL course, it's $1,000, also non-refundable. Yeah, we will recommend 10 days, but if you need longer, let us know, and you can request an extension.
Okay. Laura, do you also want to describe the CIEE program assurance advantage, sort of our emergency pledge if things go, you know, really haywire on the program and our ability to run it?
Yes.
That seems relevant, and of course a slightly different answer for the with TEFL and the without TEFL versions there.
Right. Yes. So our policy, our CIEE policy, is that if we cancel a program before it begins, participants get a full refund for program fees. But again, like we said, we've been running this program since September in Spain. So I know a lot of people are probably concerned about COVID and about the viability of the program. We feel very confident that the likelihood that we would cancel a program at this point is very low. The program, this policy, this cancellation and refund policy gets a little bit tricky if you are taking our TEFL course, because that's an online course. Even if we cancel our Teach in Spain program, we can still run the TEFL course. So if you are, let's say something major happens, we have to cancel a program, we have to cancel the Teach in Spain program, and you're already starting to take classes in our TEFL course, you won't be able to get a refund on those TEFL fees, unfortunately, because you're already because that particular program is still running.
Great. A couple folks are asking for clarification on TEFL. Is it required? Is it recommended? Does it have an impact on your chances of acceptance or where you're placed?
Great question. It is not required, and it is recommended, I think encouraged, especially if you don't have teaching experience. I think this can help. This is a great way to build up some experience before you go, but it's not going to have an impact on your like application status or on your school placement. This program is intended for people who have no teaching experience, and so if you don't have it and you don't have a TEFL certification, that shouldn't deter you.
Okay. So there's a couple questions about geography here. All of CIE's placements for this program are in the region of Madrid, so we don't have other cities, unfortunately. The questions are, what's the farthest that we might be placed from the Madrid Center, and where are most teachers placed in terms of the school that they're assigned to teach at, where that's located?
Yeah, that's a good question. So again, this is the region of Madrid. Really, the community of Madrid anywhere in there is up for grabs, but our participants are usually within like 2 hours of the city center at most. Most of our participants are in the surrounding suburbs of Madrid, so not in the city center, but close to the city. Is there anything you'd want to add, Luke?
Yeah, well, just looking at this map is helpful for sure. You can see Madrid in the center there. To the north, you can see San Sebastián de los Reyes. That's a place where people get placed. Alcalá de Henares over in the east. That's a place where there's a fair number of placements. But also, I can't quite read that. The bottom left one. Getafe is south, and then Parla is further south from that. We've placed teachers there before, a good number. And this is where the limit of my Spanish pronunciation starts to show, but Colado Villalba over to the northwest. So it really is, this whole region. There aren't a lot of schools and placements that are in like tiny towns way up in the mountains. There are a few. Most people are in sort of large towns or small cities or suburbs, not right in the central districts of Madrid, like Retiro or Chamberí or Malasaña. So yeah, I mean, it sort of just follows the map of where the population of Madrid lives, because where there's people, there's schools, and where there's schools, they need language assistance. So of course, wherever you're placed, you do still have control over how long your commute is, because you have control over over where you choose to live. So some people feel very strongly attached to the center, and if they're placed somewhere that's further away from it, they may just need to figure out what kind of transit lines would be able to take them in both directions, and then live partway in between. So they don't have a crazy commute to school, but they also don't have to, travel for too long to get downtown. Okay. There's a question about vaccines. What resources might be available for folks to be vaccinated? I'll go ahead and answer that. We don't know. Similar to another question about what kind of travel restrictions may exist between different European countries this fall, we don't know. That's all part and parcel of the uncertainty of teaching abroad during this pandemic. We really do think about fall 2021 as continuing to be during the pandemic and not after it. Even if things are improving, it's likely that authorities and countries may be pretty slow to ease back their restrictions on travel, and allow gatherings of large groups at hotels like our orientation used to be. So we really are planning for things in the fall to look a lot like they look right now. We all certainly hope that they'll be a lot more comfortable and a lot better, but I think that's more of a hope than something we're counting on at this point. So that's just sort of a reflection of how much we can't predict. And we can run the program safely and effectively under current conditions, and that's essentially what we're planning to do for the fall. I don't think we'll be back to normal yet. We'll say it that way. Okay, question for you, Laura. Teaching Spain basics. We've got a couple folks who are very interested, but perhaps they haven't lived abroad in another country. Could you run through the requirements for basics again, and describe how we would approach that when we're reviewing applications? If someone has applied for basics but isn't eligible, what might we do in that case?
Yes, yeah, that's a good question. These are kind of broad requirements here. We do try to be fairly flexible in accepting different types of experience in terms of like teaching. So these are some just types of teaching experience that you have, even if you don't have a specific experience as a classroom teacher. Um, I think that it's, we're always open to having a conversation. If you're not really sure if you meet eligibility, feel free to like email or schedule a call with us and we can talk a little bit more about that. But generally, I would say if you have a basics application already and are working on it right now, I think that like there's some sections in there where you talk about you have to show your language abilities, whether that's like a transcript showing coursework you've taken or placement test results or something. Um, in terms of the other requirements like living abroad and your teaching experience, I think the resume is probably the best place to indicate that. But we'll look at your whole application and judge it holistically to see if you meet the eligibility requirements. If we find that we don't, we'll reach out to you individually. And this is true really of any of your application materials. If there's some sort of like error or anything like that, or if we're missing something, we'll reach out to you and let you know what's missing and give you an opportunity to correct it, or send in like any missing documents that we would need. But if after you've applied to basics, if we find you just don't meet the eligibility requirements, we're open to having you switch your application to a regular Teach in Spain application and consider you for that program.
Awesome. Thanks, Laura. We've got a question about folks hoping to be placed together. How easy is that to do, and what's the best way to accomplish that?
Yes, that's a great question. So you can be placed with a friend, partner in your application when we have, and it's a task called host school placement preferences. That's where you indicate like your location preferences, age group preferences. We'll also ask if you're doing the program with someone. You should both put each other's names down so we can kind of match your applications together. It's unlikely that we'll place you in the exact same school, but we'll try to put you in schools that are close to each other.
Okay. Next question is when do we expect specific school placements to be ready? And once the deposit is paid and someone is getting ready to be placed, when would the remaining balance of the program fee be due?
Yeah, good question. So that kind of all happens around the same time. You'll get your school placement probably May or June. And then shortly after you get your placement, the remaining balance is due. So your program fees after the deposit is due shortly after you get your placements.
Okay, we've got a question here about insurance and medical care. I'll just jump in and answer that. What kind of care is available in Spain? In Madrid, there's a wide range of options. Lots of different hospitals and clinics and specialists throughout the city. We recommend a specific hospital, HM Hospitales. They're a private hospital with an international specialty division, which means it's very easy for them to provide care and assistance in different languages, including English, which is certainly helpful for people who are having a tough day or sick. It might hinder their ability to communicate well in Spanish. So that's a great resource. We've got some mental health, multilingual counseling providers that we describe as well. And people can also get a lot of care from pharmacies for more ordinary things. In terms of what the insurance covers, the insurance that's included in the CIEE program is designed to cover unforeseen, unexpected illnesses and injuries. So, if someone, let's say, has an infection, goes to a doctor, gets it diagnosed, gets a prescription, fills it at a pharmacy, all of those things would be covered by the iNext insurance as included with the program, because that's unforeseen, unexpected. On the other hand, something that's sort of routine or maintenance medication, for example, someone who needs insulin and test strips for diabetes and equipment, that's not unforeseen, and that's sort of maintenance care and falls outside the scope of the insurance that we provide. So that also applies to to COVID. Obviously that's an unforeseen infection, and that is covered by our insurance if someone gets sick and needs care, up to the $100,000 limit of the coverage. It also applies to mental health. The same principle as physical health. If someone's seeing a counselor regularly already, they're not going to provide coverage or reimbursement for that. But if something bad happens, something traumatic, and there are good counseling resources available in Madrid to help someone respond and process that, that's sort of a triggering event, something unforeseen, unexpected. And there is coverage for mental health care to help respond to that as well. Okay. Okay, here's a question about letters of recommendation, a couple of them. Are there any specific requirements or pointers for letters of recommendation? And does someone need to wait for the letter to be uploaded before they click submit on the rest of their application?
Yeah, that's a great question. We don't have like a required format for the letter of recommendation. There's not like specific questions that your recommender needs to answer. I would say my piece of advice is to just pick someone who knows you really well. I feel like title is not really something that we have an eye towards. Like for instance, you shouldn't feel pressured to choose a professor who's a professor who doesn't know you well just because they're a professor. If you have like a boss or a manager who knows you really well and can speak well to your abilities, I think that would be a better choice. And then you do not, if your letter of recommendation is not in yet, you can still submit your application to CIEE. But the important thing to remember there is we will not review your application until your letter of recommendation is in. And so we'll need your letter by March 1st as well.
Okay. Let's see, what else? Here's a question about TEFL and practicum hours. So our TEFL course, the main component is online coursework, readings and assignments. There is also a practicum component. These are opportunities for the student, for the trainee to do some practice teaching or observe experienced teachers in their lessons. We do have some adaptations in place from COVID where this can certainly still be done in an in-person classroom if that's possible where you are, but for many it is not. So this can be done. There's several options for doing this with virtual classrooms or even some sort of online project-based alternatives. So that TEFL can still happen in spite of COVID. That I can give people that reassurance. Okay, other questions about visa timing. So I think I'm going to field this one, Laura.
Go for it.
How soon before the start of the program could somebody arrive in Spain, and how long after it ends can they stay? Right now, the only way American can get into Spain is with a long-term visa. And the visas for this program, they're student visas, they're going to have a start date to the visa validity printed on the document. And you can't enter Spain before the start date of that validity. And that's a hard stop until they lift the general travel restriction. So that date is ultimately determined by the Spanish consulate. And it's not something that CIEE or you, the teacher, have a lot of control over. We're confident that they'll put dates that are workable so that people can actually arrive and attend orientation. You probably shouldn't expect that they will put dates that are 3 weeks earlier so you can arrive early for the purpose of a trip or go visiting somebody. It's going to be hard to arrive in Spain much earlier than orientation, unfortunately. So I think in general, our participants are going to need to stick to the arrival schedule that we describe. On the other side, things are a bit easier. Once you're done teaching in June, your residency card will probably run out in late June or early July, but you can stay up to 90 days in the Schengen zone after that residency is done, because then you can sort of fall back on the general permission that U.S. citizen travelers have to be in Spain as a visitor, even after their sort of more specific residency has expired, for up to 90 days. Now, I don't know if other European countries will be in a position to let people in or what kind of border controls may or may not be in place, but certainly when someone wraps up their teaching in Spain in June, there's going to be no hurry to leave Spain and return to their home country. So really, in terms of when's a good time to go on a big trip, it's going to be in July after your teaching is done, since it's going to be pretty hard to arrive early and start earlier. Okay. Yeah, here's a general question. What are the benefits of choosing CIEE over other options like Medias or working directly with the Spanish Ministry of Education? I'll pass that one to you, Laura.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the biggest benefit of CIEE, I think, is the amount of support that you get. So, right now you're already experiencing a degree of it with this webinar, but that kind of like support is just going to continue and further if you do decide to do the program. Moving abroad can be a pretty daunting task, and we are really there to help support every step of the way. So like I said, the Spain visa is pretty complicated. If you feel like you could use some help with that, you could use some guidance. That's a big piece of what we do before you leave. We provide a lot of resources that are at your disposal to kind of get you introduced to what it's like to living in Spain. I think one of the biggest benefits is also when you're in Spain itself, like we have a full-time staff in Madrid. So you will always have someone to rely on. When you're there, you have someone to call. There's someone who will help you out in the event of an emergency. And there's logistical help as well in terms of our travel insurance, in terms of like the hotel stay and the airport pickup and things like that. Yeah, I think I think that there are a lot of different options, and it's important to think about what you yourself are looking for in your teaching abroad experience. But I think like if you want to have support and like kind of a network of CIEE staff and also CIEE participants, I think this is a good choice for you.
Okay, here's a question. If someone changes their mind, is it possible to add the TEFL course or add the immersion component to the program, even if they didn't originally apply for it? And could they do that before the deposit or after the deposit or both?
Yes, TEFL you can add on at any time because it's online and it's not directly connected to the Teach in Spain program. So yeah, that window of opportunity is always open for you. And then in terms of immersion, you can change your program up to a point, but I'm not. Luke, do you know like about when we need to have people's kind of finalize?
Yeah, I think I think ideally someone would have a final decision by mid-May before they get placements, since it affects the amount of the program fee that comes after that. Yeah, if it runs into June, yeah, I think mid-May would be the latest we could do that.
Okay. Cool. So you have time.
Yeah, lots of time. Okay, a couple questions about, is it hard to get into the CIE program? I would like to say no. We have a fairly high acceptance rate. So we really want to help as many people have this experience as we can. And traditionally, the Madrid government has asked us for pretty significant number of positions to fill. So so far so good. If things start to look like it's filling up, or like the number of positions is smaller than we're expecting, we'll do our best to communicate about that. But if folks can apply by the deadline or as soon as possible afterwards, nobody needs to be losing sleep about getting turned away a day or two late. I think it's fair to say. Okay, there are more questions here. Laura, is there anything that you've seen or thoughts that have occurred to you that you wanted to comment on?
I think I covered everything I wanted to cover.
Yeah, well, thank you everyone for these great questions. These are helpful for everybody, I think, to sort of hear get these answers so they can know what to expect and help prepare. Let's see. There are a couple more that we haven't answered yet, but I do want to be mindful of time, and I think we may. Oh, here's a quick one I can answer. How do we know if the letter of recommendation has been sent? If you are looking at your own application, there should be a section that's called Tasks Others Complete. And if your letter of recommendation is showing up under Tasks Others Complete, it means they haven't done it yet, or possibly they emailed it to us and we haven't processed and uploaded it yet. If you don't see a section that says Tasks Others Complete, that is a pretty good indication that the rec letter's been received. So hopefully that's a helpful tip. Okay, so there are more questions here. I think I am going to call it at this point. These questions are being logged, so the ones that are still here, I'm going to make a point of just sending a quick email to reach out to those people and follow up with answers. Some of them are getting a little more specific. But yeah, thank you so much, Laura, for delivering this presentation, getting it ready for folks. Thank you, all of you in the audience, for your great questions. I hope the answers have been helpful. We really look forward to working with you. So thanks, and we'll be in touch, and we'll see you in Spain.
Thanks, everyone.